Africa comes from one family, and it's nonsense for us to promote identity politics. And the first thing we need to kill in Africa is that artificial nationalism by uniting Africa. Unless we unite Africa, the problems of Africa will remain impossible to solve because the dragons are loose. When we unite Africa, we engulf all those problems in a net. We hold them in a net and we know the boundaries of our responsibility. Then we can cut down those problems into manageable individual problems that we can then begin solving. And xenophobia is no exception. African unity will bring that common decency and bring back meaning to people's lives. The reason why xenophobia has failed to be solved is it's too expensive to solve. It's too expensive to protect all these economic refugees and expats. First of all, they're in millions. It takes millions of police that are doing just one job, and there are many problems that have been caused by this lack of meaning in Africa, where to dedicate the whole police to just that problem. You know, it's ridiculous to build an intellectual wall so governments are not fools to stop people from coming in, because they understand that the world revolves around competence. So if you block competence, you kill the society. But much as they know that, they don't know what to do to build local capacity. And that's why you see the local people, the natives, can't compete. And this is the colonial problems, because the white people educate themselves in a different education. I mean, the colonialists educated themselves with a different education than the education they gave the Africans. You know, I'm sorry when I say white people, you know, it's not anything against white people, but, you know, in Africa, white people means colonialism. And it's wrong, but, you know, sometimes I sleep and I say it, but nothing against white people. Colonialism. We also need to completely change the African education system and teach people against nationalism and begin teaching Pan-Africanism, because nationalism is artificial. There is no such thing as the Ugandan state. There is no such thing as the Kenyan state. That's bullshit. Africa, at best, if you looked at real true group identities, was clans. And clans had forefathers that were related. And if you look deeper into African tribes, you will see that. You will see that the forefather of this kingdom is a brother to the forefather of this kingdom. Or actually, they are the same people, just named different names. The story is the same story of the origin of Africa. You know it. Anyone who has put in time to investigate it knows this. So we need to educate Africans their true heritage. I told you, stop looking at the 100-year artificial heritage that colonialism has given you. That's apeness. Look at the 10,000-year-old heritage of Africa. The Africa of the pyramids. The Africa of the Nile. You realize that the small kingdom that you're fighting for, the small land you're fighting for, killing your fellow brothers over, is part of a big African kingdom, and there's more opportunity for you outside, even besides that small native village that you're holding on to. The education system, and when I say education system, I don't mean the formal system, because unless Africa gets its own currency, you're not going to be able to sponsor anything that is good for Africa, because the whole Africa is based on charity. You're based on an overprotective European mother. an Oedipo mother, Europe, that feeds you on aid and aid and aid and stops you from facing your true problems. And that's how you're enslaved. Because you need to understand the definition of freedom. Freedom is what blurs you, blocks your eyes from seeing your problem. And so when aid comes, you throw money at things and life continues and you think you've solved problems, which is ridiculous. You can't throw money at problems. You need to throw responsibility at problems. And being denied responsibility is being denied freedom. And that's the problem in Africa. And that's the denial of meaning that I talk about. Africa needs to be able to find meaning and true purpose. And this is found in freedom. This is found in the opportunity to choose the right responsibilities and to take up this responsibility. And meaning can only be found after you unite as Africa. Because when you unite, then you find meaning. You know the boundaries of responsibility. Everything then becomes clear what you have to solve. Because right now, the money that is pumped in Africa is pumped to solve European problems. I told you these people come from places where they don't have. And so they need the trade. So they pump money into things that benefit them. The money in Africa is an investment. The aid is an investment. That's why it's building roads to do what? To move goods from one place to another. From one place to another place if you're complaining of poverty. To move goods from African farms to Europe. To move raw materials. Because the value chain starts in Africa, which is the rich continent. And you're selling your things at peanuts. Literally for free because you have no African currency. And to protect that of having no African currency, again, they divide you. Because, you know, it's hard for Kenya to trade with Uganda and discuss a deal and make any economics that makes sense in terms of trade. You can't join arms and negotiate. So you're divided. And it's easy for someone to negotiate with Uganda, a different deal, with Kenya, a different deal, you know. Pit one against each other, start a rebel movement, you know, sponsor some group of people. This identity politics is what kills Africa. So nationalism needs to be totally African unity, please, people. African unity, Africans, wake up, wake up, wake up and unite. You don't even need to wait for anything because you're not going to solve any problem leading to African unity. There's nothing to discuss. Unite and then we start dealing. If we just unite and then we start dealing with okay, tomorrow, new passport. Next day, new currency. Next day, we start solving problems as a united Africa. Next day, maybe African army to start dealing with this small xenophobia and policing. But policing needs to be in the African, entrenched in the African community. At the individual level, you have to train your kids better. Teach your kids their responsibility. Stop overprotecting kids like the white man has overprotected you with aid. And stop being tyrants, stopping kids from expressing themselves. Here at the Kenyan model, this channel is dedicated to the youth, to encourage the young people to take up the man, to take up responsibility. Because the future is really yours. And you're way smarter than any generation before you. God created each generation to be smarter than the next. You're more privileged with information and with technologies to solve problems than the generations before you. You better start now. But I know it's also going to be difficult for you because we have failed to unite Africa. That's why we need to unite Africa now. So that we help you see your problems. Otherwise, if we don't unite Africa, you're unable to know your problems. And so you're denied responsibility. There's no enslavement as bad as being denied responsibility. You're not told. It's like, imagine you're walking naked and no one tells you you're naked. You will be embarrassed. You will be a laughing stock, but you will not know. It's the worst thing that can happen. And that's why Africa is a laughing stock. Because everyone sees Africa is naked. Except the African. Because they are paying you to be naked. You think you're entertaining the world. You become a world clown. So let's summarize this xenophobia problem. I already shared in the first video. What is xenophobia? Xenophobia is a cry for meaning. People don't understand why they are suffering. They don't understand the undue suffering that is getting worse and worse, the economic stress. They don't know it. They don't know the problem. And of course, because you don't know the problem, they don't have the solution. So what do? They blame God. When you take people to dark places, they want to blame God. And you know, God ends up being anybody else, anything else. If there was no person to kill with xenophobia, they would have killed nature. They would have revolted against the government. It's that cry, it's that activist cry, it's that human rights advocacy. All that is a cry for meaning. Xenophobia is a cry for purpose. People need purpose. People need discipline and responsibility, and they don't have that. The education system is not teaching Africans that. The education system is not giving Africans purpose, meaningful purpose. It's teaching them funny, stupid things, teaching them to WhatsApp and to Facebook, and to admire things that don't really help them. You can never be happy with your brother suffering. And the African culture is so attached that your heart tells you that's your brother, even if, you know, the books will tell you about biological funny differences. Your heart pains you when you see that suffering. And that's why you hold knives to attack anybody else that is not of your group identity. Xenophobia is a cry for freedom. I told you, freedom is knowledge of problems. Freedom is opportunity to responsibility, opportunity for responsibility. If you deny people ability to take up responsibility, the opportunity to take up responsibility, if you deny people knowledge of their problems, you enslave them. And because people don't have problems to solve, because they don't know what problems to solve, and yet they are suffering continuously, they turn to the new person and they kill them because they want to blame them for their problems. They think they are the problem. Even if you know that killing the foreigner doesn't really solve anything. That's why xenophobia has never ended from when it started. So it's a cry for freedom. Finally, xenophobia is a cry for heritage. It's a cry for memory. These Africans don't understand African heritage. They are ignorant and they think Africa and their life is that small village, that small town where they live, and so they would rather die before they lose it. They don't know that the whole Africa is theirs. And they don't know that it's their responsibility to solve problems all over Africa. And there are more opportunities, because an opportunity is an opportunity to responsibility. It's not an opportunity to make money. That's stupid. That's a very stupid mentality to think that life is about happiness and making money. Life is a more profound problem. It's a problem of solving problems. And this whole society, colonial society that rewards people with happiness, glorified thieves, is the one of the biggest problems. And that's the problem to be mad against. And it's an individual problem. We all look out for this stupid money instead of looking out for responsibility. And we recognize people that have money and we don't recognize people that have solved problems. We need to change this very, very quickly in Africa. People don't know the African heritage, they don't know the African history. So they look at these 100 years of colonialism and think that's Africa. And they truly believe that they are South Africans and they are different from Ugandans and they are different from Zimbabweans. And that's why they are killing Zimbabweans, that they are taking their jobs. They are killing other tribes that they are taking their jobs. That's madness. These are your brothers. They are more entitled. They are also as entitled to that land as you. But you will never know that unless Africa is united. Because after Africa is united, you will find a shared history. The history of Africa will easily morph into where it started. And our problem will be to solve that problem of finding our unity. And it's obvious, it's there. I've told you, people from around the Nile, the East Africans, most of them understand this history. Study the East African history and relate on the migration patterns, the true migration patterns, not the ones told to you by colonialism. Telling you funny things that people, migration, migration did start from there. When God created the world, we know where life started. It's obvious. It's where the oldest bones have been found. It's not coincidence that the oldest bones have been found there. And if you doubt it, find an older bone. And we want true human bones, not funny bones that are being created left and right to justify other nonsense. African heritage is that Africa is one family. We have always been one family. We will always be one family. We came from one man and one woman, and they produced several kids. And of course, as the numbers grew, they moved further and further away. We started in the north because it was green, and the south had these wild animals. It was a deep forest. You can go deep in Congo and you see these forests. In Uganda, in Central Africa, you will see where there is no desert, you will see these deep forests. That's where the wild animals in Africa lived, and no one went there. We had few black, settlements here and there, but we all had one worship center, which was in Kemet, all the way through East Africa, Ethiopia, because that's where the life started. That's where the forefathers were. Those were the capital cities. Ethiopia. This is our true history. That's why they were not colonized. Because when they brought to them Christianity, it was like the Ethiopians had even more knowledge of Christianity than the people that were trying to sell Christianity. If you looked at any of those East African heritage and traditional ideology, you will find Christianity real deep embedded there. The values. That's if you understand what Christianity is all about. That's if you understand the meta stories, the values behind Christianity. Because Christianity is not the personalities, it's the values. The book, ignore the names and extract the value. That's what history is for. That's what true memory is. True memory is hindsight. It's a basis to extract the structure of the future, to extract information of how to structure the future. And so the cry for heritage is a cry for hindsight, a cry for information, a cry for values to extract that can help them create a less suffering future. But the reality of life is that it will always be suffering. At least the purpose of living, the meaning in life, is trying to reduce that suffering as much as possible, until hopefully one day it will all be gone, and that's the day when we shall go to heaven. That's the day of going to heaven, when there will be no more suffering, because people have learned to serve others, to serve themselves through serving others. So it's a cry for who to serve. We need to stop serving the individual and understand that you become less of a burden to society by serving the society. And you serve the society by being responsible. And that's why we promote subsistence, self-reliance. The beginning of reducing suffering is being less of a burden yourself. But because Africa is a family, subsistence means helping yourself and helping others, because subsistence ends up working together, but in an organized way for the common value creation within the individual, but within all of you. So what's the solution to xenophobia? Finally, the solution to xenophobia is African unity. I've told you, African unity traps the dragons in a net. It traps all African problems in a net. It grabs all of them and reveals them. So it exposes the problems for us to solve, which means that it frees. and brings meaning. Because once the problems are exposed, then the responsibility is exposed. And so we find meaning. And when we find meaning, and when we identify the problems, and when we have opportunity to responsibility, then we attain back our freedom. The extra benefits from this African unity, besides eliminating xenophobia, but that will lead to elimination of xenophobia, is of course we'll be able to initiate an African currency to sponsor solving African problems. Uniting Africa will open up opportunities also, because people will not only be locked and entitled to their small villages, but there will be, the whole Africa will be theirs, and it will be a matter of competence. And so it will naturally bring up need for building the individual, for subsistence, for improving value of the individual. Unifying Africa will take away the entitlement of the lack of knowledge about heritage and the origin of Africa. And so people will stop being entitled to, oh, this is our land, you're a foreigner, because they'll realize we are all brothers. We are all Africans. And it will expose the incompetence, because for the beginning times, the few places that will remain violent against newcomers will have competent people run from them, and so they will begin suffering. And once you begin suffering, they will also want to go out and seek opportunities. And so the karma returns, because that's what happens. No one is going to suffer while other people enjoy. So these people are just ungrateful bastards that have no understanding of how economics work. But when you take away the competent people, then their businesses will fall, their villages will suffer, undue suffering will be back, unless they are competent. And if they are competent and it's their land, then allow them to be in their land and solve their problems. And until the rest of Africa is at the level of that single village, where you feel like that village is dragging us behind, then there is no need to pressure people. But also, uniting Africa will bring back the love, the Ubuntu, and we'll stop killing each other over nonsense. We can end xenophobia, and we end xenophobia through uniting Africa. Africa, unite. That's my opinion on xenophobia with these two videos. If you haven't subscribed to the Ken Rod Experience, please subscribe. The Ken Rod Experience is dedicated to the youth. We're looking at the young people. The young people, this is your world. Join the conversation. Let's change our minds. Let's free ourselves from that Oedipo overprotection of our parents and the tyranny of the culture that has been created by the 100 years of exploitation and colonialism. Let's bring back that African heritage, a strong African heritage, through unity. Thank you, guys.